I was 8 years old when I realized I didn't exist the same way my brother did. Not to my parents, at least. I'm Julia Barrett. I'm 34 now, but there are still nights when I lie awake remembering the way my name would disappear from conversations in our house, like it didn't carry any weight. We lived in a rigid 2-story house in Fayetteville, North Carolina, right near Fort Bragg, where you could hear choppers before the sun came up, and bedtime meant standing up straight for Dad's evening check. That's how he ran our family. Like we were another extension of the military. My father was Colonel Thomas Barrett, retired but still very much on duty. The man shaved at exactly 0500 every morning and made me recite the military phonetic alphabet before I could eat my cereal. My mother, Evelyn, was quieter, a former trauma nurse who saw too much during her deployment and never quite found her voice again. She loved us in a way that never reached her face, through routines, folded laundry, and sitting silently in the dark with her coffee. In a house like that, feelings didn't belong. Discipline did. Dean, my older brother by 5 years, took to that world like it was designed just for him. He was tall, early, sharp-jawed like Dad, and could disassemble and reassemble a rifle blindfolded by the time he was 16. He was the golden boy, captain of the track team, ROTC leader, and the subject of every story Dad told at dinner parties. "That's my son," he'd beam. He was born for the uniform. Me. I was efficient. I got good grades, played soccer for a while, joined the debate team. I wasn't rebellious or loud. I just never seemed to shine the way Dean did. It was like he had a spotlight built into his skin, and I was always stuck behind the curtain hoping someone would remember I was still on stage. I remember once in 5th grade I won a statewide essay contest. The prize was a trip to D.C. and a certificate signed by a senator. I handed the envelope to my dad at dinner, and he glanced at it before folding it and setting it aside. "That's nice," he said, already turning to ask Dean about his track meet. My mom nodded and went back to her plate. No one asked what I wrote about. It became a pattern. I learned not to expect fanfare or praise. At some point I even stopped wanting it. I just wanted to matter. When Dean enlisted the day after his high school graduation, the whole house erupted with pride. Dad brought out old uniforms and medals. Mom made a scrapbook. Our living room became a shrine, walls lined with Dean's photos in dress blues, awards in plastic frames, a folded flag in a glass case, even though he was very much alive and kicking. 3 years later I enlisted too. I didn't tell them right away. I just walked into the recruiting office alone, signed the papers, and then waited until I had my assignment before calling home. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You sure about this?" Dad asked, his voice flat. "I am." "Well, let me know where they send you." No scrapbook. No framed picture on the wall. Not even a dinner to send me off. Just a phone call that ended with an awkward, "Be safe." I didn't join to follow Dean. I joined because I needed to break away. I needed to find out who I was when I wasn't trying to earn someone else's approval. I thought maybe the military could give me structure and purpose. Maybe there my actions would speak louder than my birth order. But that wasn't how it worked. Not with my family anyway. Every time I came home on leave it was the same. The house looked like a museum to Dean's legacy. Photos of him shaking hands with commanders, running through obstacle courses, standing at attention. Not a single photo of me in uniform. Once during Christmas my dad handed me a gift. A book on military leadership, with a note inside that read, "Maybe this will help you catch up to your brother." I laughed it off at the time. But that night I cried in the upstairs hallway, staring at Dean's framed commendation letter from Fort Hood. That house wasn't a home for me. It was a scoreboard and I was always losing. I told myself it didn't matter. That I didn't need the pictures or the recognition. But deep down I did. Not for the praise, but because I wanted my parents to look at me and see me. Not just as Dean's little sister or some background soldier, but as Julia. As someone worth remembering. I didn't know then that one day I'd be the one standing in the spotlight. But it would come at a cost I never could have imagined. I was 29 when I saw Dean again. This time not as my brother, but as a superior officer standing across a field tent in a war zone. It had been almost a year since we'd spoken. I was stationed at a forward operating base near Al Dhafra in the Middle East, working as a logistics and field intel coordinator. I had built a reputation for precision, quiet, methodical, and fiercely dependable. I wasn't chasing glory. I was chasing clarity, order, and making sure people got home alive. Dean had already made captain and had recently been transferred to the same region. He was posted to strategic oversight, coordinating cross-unit operations, which unfortunately included mine. When I first heard his name on the dispatch, I stared at the paper for a full minute like maybe it would change if I blinked hard enough. It didn't. The moment he walked into our mission tent, flanked by 2 aides and wearing that smug, too relaxed grin, I felt my stomach twist. "Lieutenant Barrett," he said like it was a joke. "Didn't think I'd be running into you out here." He made it sound casual, but we both knew better. Our last family interaction had been strained at best. I had only visited home once after my enlistment. Dean got a parade. I got past the mashed potatoes and barely a word. Since then, our conversations had been limited to birthdays and 2-word text replies. So I kept it professional. "Captain Barrett. Welcome to Dosi Delta." That week, I was finalizing plans for Operation Crimson Light, a reconnaissance mission through a disputed corridor that had seen spikes in enemy movement. I'd been prepping for weeks, coordinating satellite imagery, ground-level surveillance, and supply lines. It was tight but solid. I just needed 72 more hours for final confirmation. But Dean had other plans. "Intel is great, Jules," he said during a briefing, flipping through my maps like they were high school homework. "But Command wants us to move. We wait too long and we lose momentum." "We don't have satellite confirmation yet," I pushed back. "We could be walking them into blind terrain." Dean leaned back, all confidence and calm danger. "I've done this long enough to trust my gut. Your team can handle it." I should have fought harder. Every cell in my body was screaming wait. But he pulled rank and I hesitated. I didn't want another conversation about how I was difficult. I didn't want to be written off as emotional or insubordinate. And somewhere, buried deep under layers of resentment, a part of me still wanted him to respect me. So I signed off. The mission launched 36 hours later. At 400 hours I got the call. They'd triggered a perimeter trap. Tripwires and buried charges laced through what had looked like an abandoned stretch. 1 soldier was killed on impact. 2 others were severely wounded. The team had to extract under fire, dragging each other across unstable ground while radioing for airlift support. When they got back, I saw the blood on their uniforms. I smelled it. And I'll never forget the eyes of Sergeant Reyes, who had led the ground team. Eyes that asked me why. The next 72 hours were chaos. Reports were filed, investigations launched. And just like that, Dean vanished from the center of it. Instead, my name was on the incident summary. Failure in logistical coordination. Mission deployed without confirmed imagery. Breach of procedural threshold. I was stunned. I knew the signatures. The timeline. Dean had altered the op schedule and expedited clearance. But he had done it through his direct channels. And somehow in the final paperwork none of it stuck to him. I was summoned for review. I told the truth, every detail I could recall. But command doesn't always run on truth. It runs on hierarchy. And in that hierarchy my brother was on his way up. The disciplinary report didn't result in discharge, but it gutted my record. I was placed on extended leave pending reassignment. It was a quiet punishment, a way of pushing me out without the paperwork. When I returned home, my father greeted me with cold detachment. "You need to own your failures, Julia," he said, as if I hadn't already been carrying them like bricks on my back. My mother didn't speak much. Just poured tea and looked through me. Then came the final insult, an invitation to Dean's formal promotion ceremony in D.C. I was hesitant, but a small part of me still hoped for some acknowledgement, some moment of decency. I wore my uniform, polished my boots, and showed up at the hotel ballroom. My name wasn't on the list. The security guard double-checked. "Sorry, ma'am. You're not on the guest registry." I stood outside for 10 minutes in full dress, while people I didn't know passed me by in heels and medals, clapping and laughing. I didn't cry. I just stood there, stone still, burning inside. That night, I went back to my hotel and deleted every photo I had of my family. I booked a one-way flight to Arizona and turned off my phone for weeks. Whatever part of me had been waiting to be seen by them, it died that day. But something else started to grow in its place. Grief doesn't always feel like sadness. Sometimes it's just emptiness. Like someone turned off the volume on your entire life. That's what it felt like when I landed in Arizona, alone and officially on leave, but with nowhere to report back to. I rented a small trailer in Sierra Vista, close enough to Fort Huachuca that I could still hear morning drills echo in the distance, but far enough away that no one knew my name. I took night shifts at a veterans clinic. Paperwork, basic intake, helping with transportation. It was the only job I could stomach. I wasn't ready to put on a uniform again, but I also wasn't ready to pretend I was just a civilian. Not after everything I had seen. Not after everything I had lost. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not Dean. Not my parents. Not the few friends I'd kept in the military. I figured they either didn't notice I was gone or they already believed what the report said, that I'd screwed up and people died because of it. For months I lived like a ghost. Grocery store, clinic, bed. Rinse, repeat. I stopped wearing my dog tags. I stopped checking my email. I stopped being me. And then, something strange happened. It was late, close to 1 a.m., and I was closing up the intake room when I got a ping on my personal laptop. A secure message. No name, just an ID code I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "I believe you." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, debating whether to open it. For a second I was convinced it was spam or worse. A trap. But I clicked. It was a single-page document. A system log pulled from the TOC server back in Al Dafra. The metadata showed a time-stamped alteration to the Crimson Light Ops schedule, 3 hours before the mission launched. And next to the change was a user clearance code. Dean's. At the bottom of the message there was no name. Just 5 words. "You didn't deserve that." I felt everything at once. Shock, fear, fury, and something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. Someone out there had seen it happen. Someone had watched Dean manipulate the system and knew I took the fall. And now they were handing me a breadcrumb, quietly, like a lifeline tossed into a storm. That night I didn't sleep. I started digging. I contacted 2 former intel officers I trusted. People who owed me nothing but had seen how I operated. I asked questions, requested old routing logs, even used encrypted proxies to request communication transcripts through FOIA loopholes. I didn't say I was trying to take down my brother. I said I was looking for the truth. And the truth came in pieces. A requisition form signed in duplicate, Dean's and a higher-ups. A memo mentioning accelerated mission scheduling, due to pressure from an unnamed source. A quiet complaint filed by Sergeant Reyes, who had survived the ambush and had apparently questioned the timing of the deployment in his post-op debrief, before the file was mysteriously marked incomplete. Took me 4 months, but I built a case. Messy, circumstantial, but damning if put in the right hands. I compiled it into a report with annotations and timeline overlays. I submitted it directly to the Office of the Inspector General under my full name, Julia Renee Barrett. And then I waited. Weeks passed. Nothing. Then one morning while I was refilling the copier paper at the clinic, my burner phone buzzed. "Lieutenant Barrett? This is Colonel Marcy Rhodes, Office of Military Ethics. Are you available to speak privately?" I locked myself in the supply closet. She didn't sugarcoat it. "We've completed a preliminary review. You were not responsible for the decision to deploy the Crimson Light Unit early. You followed procedure, and your recommendation to delay was overridden without proper clearance. The disciplinary report on your record is being expunged." I opened my mouth but nothing came out. She continued. "If you're interested, we'd like to offer you reinstatement. Full benefits, active status. And, based on your prior service record and the strength of your case, a promotion recommendation is being submitted." My knees gave out. I sat on the floor, surrounded by mops and bleach, while tears soaked the collar of my shirt. I didn't say yes right away. I let the offer sit for a few days, just to make sure I wasn't chasing something for the wrong reasons. But deep down I knew I had unfinished work in this life. Not just for myself, but for the soldiers I'd let myself feel I failed. So I said yes. I returned to active duty 3 months later. New post, new rank, new uniform. But I was different now. I wasn't the scared sister trying to earn someone's approval. I was the woman who'd been blamed, erased, and rebuilt herself from the ruins. This time I wasn't going to let anyone speak over me. This time I was ready to lead. They called it a celebration, an anniversary event honoring the 12th Infantry Division's most distinguished contributors. To me it felt like a reckoning wrapped in dress blues and polite applause. I was 34, now a lieutenant colonel with 2 commendations and a clean slate. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I clawed my way back into the uniform they tried to strip me of. When the invitation came in a crisp white envelope with a gold embossed seal, I didn't hesitate. Fort Meade, October 12th. Full honors. Guest of distinction, Lieutenant Colonel Julia Barrett. For a second I stared at the name, my name. No +1, no reference to Dean. Just me. I hadn't spoken to my family in over 2 years. After everything there was nothing left to say. But I knew my father would be there. And Dean. Of course Dean. He never missed a chance to be seen in the right room. The ballroom was massive, marble floors gleaming like ice under the chandeliers. Metals sparkled, uniforms pressed so sharp they could cut. I stood tall in mine, silver oak leaf glinting against my chest. The old me would have been shaking. But not this version. This version had already been through the fire and walked out carrying the truth. When they called my name, I stepped onto the stage, not to applause meant for my brother, not as someone's shadow, but as a soldier whose story had once been buried. The MC read a brief bio. Decorated service, field coordination excellence, cleared of unjust reprimand, current leadership in intel development. Then came the moment. Lieutenant Colonel Barrett, would you like to say a few words? I took the mic. I didn't plan a long speech. I just spoke from where it hurt, because that's where all my strength had come from. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, followed every rule, did everything right, I'd earn my place. I thought my name would mean something if I just stayed quiet and proved myself. But silence doesn't build legacy. Truth does. The room was still. No clinking of glasses. No side conversations. I glanced at the audience and found them. Dad in his stiff blazer and Dean beside him, lips pressed into a straight line. Watching. I continued, voice steady. I've worn this uniform for years. I've served with soldiers who became family, and I've walked through grief that tried to steal my future. But I stand here not because someone believed in me, but because I refused to be erased. The applause didn't start right away. There was this pause, just a beat, and then it came. Not explosive, not performative. Just real. When I stepped down, several officers approached me. Some shook my hand with the usual formal words. Others looked at me like they finally saw me. But the moment I remember most came in the quietest corner of the room. My father walked up, slow, like the weight of his own name had gotten heavier over time. I didn't know, he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. I stayed silent. Let him sit in the discomfort. I should have asked. Should have listened. To you. You believed the version that was easiest to believe, I said, voice even. And you didn't ask because you didn't want the answer. He looked like he wanted to argue. But he didn't. He just nodded, tight, pained, and walked away. Dean followed a few minutes later, alone, shoulders stiff. You made a hell of a speech, he muttered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't need your permission. His jaw tensed. You got what you wanted. Vindication. A medal. Standing ovation. No, I said quietly. What I wanted was the truth to matter. And for once, it did. He stood there silent. Not angry. Just exposed. Because now he knew I didn't need him. Not for approval. Not for clarity. Not for anything. I turned to leave. You ever think about forgiving me? He asked. I stopped, looked back at him over my shoulder. I did, I said. But then I remembered you never apologized. And I walked out. The night air outside Fort Meade was cold, but it felt cleaner somehow, sharper. I breathed it in, hand grazing the polished metal at my collar. For years I thought I needed to be invited to the table, to be welcomed, accepted, seen. But I didn't. I built my own damn table. With splinters in my hands and no help but my own 2 feet to stand on. They built him a pedestal. I built a legacy. And now he stands in the shadow of mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.